one of the challenges that Sorsby presents is the fact that he is this big, powerful guy that if he gets past your defensive line, he's the size of your linebackers. He's bigger than your DBs, and so he's somebody that can sort of lower that shoulder and run through tackles when he gets to that next level.
Pay heed all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right, this is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and of course, I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you have not already, please subscribe, Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, where you can join many other great KU fans. We also do live shows after every KU football game. So you'll want to stay subscribed on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, so you'll be notified when we go live. For instance, on Saturday after the Cincinnati game, probably should be live around 2:30-ish after the games, within 15 to 20 minutes following the conclusion of the game on Saturday afternoon. We'll be live, so you can come hang out with us and join many other great KU fans. Join in on the conversation, share your thoughts, and spend some time with us. I promise I will remember to bring the proper equipment for this upcoming show. If you happen to tune into the live show last week, it looked like we were tuning in from the 1970s. That was because somebody forgot the webcam that we normally use.
Well, one of us looked like we were from the 1970s. One person was like crystal clear quality, and then one of us looked like he was, in an old sci-fi movie where they're trying to project the future or whatever.
We'll make sure we're better on Saturday afternoon after KU in Cincinnati, and you'll want to be there. You'll want to subscribe and tune in and join us after the show. You want to also subscribe because we have a chance to talk with coaches and players during the week. Those are on our YouTube channel as well. Kevin had a great conversation with Bryce Foster that you'll definitely want to check out on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. That was just yesterday on Tuesday. So you can keep an eye on all that stuff as well. If you are an audio listener, you can, of course, subscribe there as well on Apple, Spotify. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps us grow the channel, and we very much appreciate those of you that do support us, and we hope that you'll continue to support over the course of the season, because it is continuing to look each week like this could be a very, very fun football season for Kansas. Before we dive deeper into KU and Cincinnati, which of course is the game coming up on Saturday, there was some other news I wanted to mention here quickly off the top from earlier in the week. On Tuesday, KU men's basketball announced its conference schedule came out. Of course, we already knew about the non-con, which features games at North Carolina. You also play Princeton. You got the Champions Classic against Duke. You've got the Players Era in Las Vegas. We're going to be playing Notre Dame and Syracuse. You're going to play UConn. You'll play Missouri. You also play at NC State. That's just the non-conference schedule. The conference schedule was now released on Tuesday. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'll just quickly run through some of the games that jumped out at me. First and foremost, Kevin, I hate starting it at UCF because KU has played at UCF early in conference play recently, and it has not gone well. So don't love that right off the bat. Not a fan of that one. But you get Iowa State at home on January 13th, followed by Baylor on January 16th. So kind of two back-to-back home games that are pretty significant. Fairly early in conference play. Those are your 4th and 5th conference games. You play at K-State on January 24th. A missed opportunity. I seem to be able to talk about this. A missed opportunity for the Big 12 to not have KU play BYU twice, I think, because of AJ Dubinsta and Darren Peterson, and sort of the continuance of a bit of a high school rivalry that those guys had. KU plays only at home against BYU, which from the KU perspective, you're happy about that, obviously. That's on January 31st. Later in the schedule, you play at Texas Tech following that. That's a Saturday, Monday, kind of a quick turnaround there with BYU at home and then at Texas Tech. So we'll see how that goes. You play at Iowa State on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And then down the stretch of the season, you get Houston at home late in the year. You have an Arizona swing. KU fans may be a little bit scarred by some of the West Coast swings that Kansas has had recently that maybe has derailed their season. Well, 2 of your last 3 games, you go on a West Coast swing to Arizona. You play it at Arizona on February 28th, and then at Arizona State on March 3rd. And then, interestingly enough, you finish the season at home against K-State. So that could be a fun one to possibly, if the season goes how KU fans may hope it goes, you could be talking about playing on senior night against K-State with a chance to maybe have already clinched the Big 12 or clinch the Big 12 potentially. That would be a really cool moment, obviously, and then maybe of course, it's always nice to take care of business against K-State at home. So let's look at the conference schedule. Kevin, just some real kind of fast thoughts from you if you have any maybe takeaways from some of those games.
Yeah, for one thing, it feels like the senior night streak will keep going, and I'm not trying to write checks they can't cash or anything. It just Kansas has traditionally had a lot of success against K-State at Allen Fieldhouse in particular, and so coming back home having a game like that for senior night feels like the streak has a pretty strong chance to continue. I liked what you said about the BYU game because I think the two teams that I would love to see every year, obviously, you play home and away, are K-State and Iowa State for rivalry type reasons. But I think that third game, you really want it to be sort of whatever the quote unquote marquee, matchup will be that year. And there are so many storylines right now with Kansas and BYU. You mentioned AJ Dybansa, obviously. BYU cleaned KU's clock a year ago and should have a really good team this year. And so you have a chance to have two really good teams squaring off in addition to the NBA stuff. By the way, on the NBA stuff, Nick, there's a really talented young scout out there named Ben Pfeiffer. And he wrote this terrific article, I believe this past week, about basically the top talents in the NBA draft and how they create advantages on offense. And I would recommend anybody read that. There's a lot on Darren Peterson. One of the standout things about Darren Peterson is he creates advantages in all kinds of ways. Most people have sort of, hey, I'm really good at this. This is how I butter my bread. Darren Peterson apparently butters his bread with butter, jam, honey, whatever he needs to butter to create advantages. And the ability for him, I think Ben created like 6 different categories in which they could, create chances. And Darren Peterson checked 5 of the 6, which is really rare. Also had a really good section on AJ Dybansa and sort of what makes him unique. One of the interesting things with him, Nick, is he's not good, or not as good, I should say, dealing with ball screens. He's much better as an ISO guy where kind of everybody else clears out and he has more space to work. It'll be interesting to see how KU sort of combats that defensively because BYU traditionally has kind of spread you out. So it feels like that would be a good fit for him to take advantage of those talents. But maybe, Nick, we should have Ben on a future show to kind of talk about that a little bit. But yeah, to your point, you don't get Houston twice, which is kind of nice, honestly. You don't get BYU twice, which I think would have been sort of the made for TV matchup. And so a few missed opportunities there, but I do overall I think that the schedule sets up for Kansas to maybe start off, has some success after a really tough non-conference season, and maybe work their way in during Big 12 play.
Yeah, I mean, again, you start at UCF, and I kind of jokingly said I hate it because of what's happened in the past, but UCF, you should be able to win that game.
You won at UCF last year by like a 50 burger. So
yeah, that's true, I guess. Yeah, maybe that erased my horrors of the time before. But then you get TCU at home, then you go at West Virginia, but then you do have Iowa State and Baylor back to back. But those games are both at home too. So sure. Yeah, I think it shapes up nicely. By the way, the other team you mentioned, the opponents that KU plays twice, K-State and Iowa State. The other team this year is Arizona. Mentioned KU goes at Arizona on February 28th. Arizona comes to Lawrence on February 9th. So you don't play BYU twice, but Arizona certainly will also be more of a marquee matchup, I would say, just in terms of brand names and high level basketball programs. So you do still end up with that. And I think, this is sort of, I guess, the bit of the double-edged sword of being Kansas, and that you're going to more often than not be matched up with whatever other marquee programs because people want Kansas to be, at the forefront. And so you end up playing some of the tougher Big 12 opponents twice, I guess, with Arizona being the other team that you get there. So
yeah, no disrespect to UCF, TCU, etc. But
yeah.
I think generally speaking, and last year KU did play UCF twice, but I think generally speaking, Kansas is probably not going to get those games, or Oklahoma State get those games twice. It's probably generally going to be something like K-State, Iowa State. 2 years ago, they didn't play Iowa State twice, and I hated that, Nick. I love when you go to Hilton and then come back to Allen Fieldhouse. The rivalry reasons, the home court reasons, with two really good home courts there as well. And so I like playing Iowa State twice, K-State twice. This year, a perfect schedule. Like I said, would have had BYU probably as the other opponent, but Arizona not a bad opponent to get twice.
I agree. By the way, you slipped in Oklahoma State. Speaking of Oklahoma State, on the football side, no more Mike Gundy. Some pretty big news there out of the Big 12. And by the way, old friend alerts, in case you're wondering, the new interim head coach at Oklahoma State is one Doug Meacham.
Yes.
Who, of course, was briefly the offensive coordinator at Kansas way back when. So kind of a full circle moment there, I guess. And we'll see. I mean, I would assume that he's going to be the interim head coach when when Oklahoma State, I should say, comes to play at Kansas.
Sure.
Later at the start of November 1st in Lawrence. So I don't know. Kind of adds another interesting layer of storyline to that potential matchup. But yeah, disastrous for Oklahoma State, obviously. And you feel bad for him because Gundy's obviously a legend and did incredible things for Oklahoma State, but didn't quite end, I think, the way that anybody would have hoped that one would end, with him being fired just 4 games into the season for them. But felt like it needed to happen after kind of what had happened to them against Tulsa and sort of that trajectory of that program. But I wouldn't expect that to save their season. So, I'm not one to just pencil in automatic W's, but you could maybe look at that Oklahoma State game
and feel reasonably good about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Before we get into Cincinnati, Kevin, one other final little tidbit that we haven't had a chance to talk about here on the show quite yet is there was that report that came out late last week. It was actually before the West Virginia game about the possibility of Kansas playing in an international game in London against Arizona State. That was the report. The game, by the way, has not been finalized. This is just kind of some reporting, but Lance Leipold was asked about it earlier in the week and kind of gave a long, winding answer that basically all but confirmed, at least in my eyes, that it's going to happen. He started off by saying I can't officially say anything about it. And then he gave this kind of long answer about how playing internationally may actually be a good thing. And I basically took that as, well, that's presumably meaning that Kansas is going to be playing internationally next year in 2026 against Arizona State. So a lot of mixed reaction to it. I think the biggest takeaway that I have, and we don't have to spend too much time really analyzing it specifically, but the biggest takeaway that I had was the proposed date that has been reported for the game is September 26th, which is basically 4 weeks into the season, right? And to me, that's a little alarming that you're going to be, basically jarring your team in the middle of the season with international travel. I mean, just you look at some of the international games that have happened in recent history, and if you lose an international game, it can really disrupt your season. Florida State loses to Georgia Tech. They go 2-10. K-State lost to Iowa State to start this season in Ireland, and look at what's happened to those boys. So you're doing it in the middle of the year. I don't know. I mean, that was kind of my initial reaction to it is, I think from a fan experience and a fan perspective standpoint, I think it's great. For KU fans to have a chance to go to London possibly and watch KU play a game there, that part of it is all sick, and the brand aspect and all that stuff. But, from a competitive standpoint, I think it is a little bit concerning because if you go and you lose that game, it could set your season back really, and you could be up for that being a game that completely swings your season positively or negatively.
Sure. And I think even teams that have won internationally, the travel has often impacted them in the game after they come back and can be the sort of thing that can derail you a little bit, even if you find a way to win there. And I think too, this, this is going to sound like a cop-out a little bit, but I don't put a ton of stock in what happens in those international games. There's so many different factors. You watch the Iowa State K-State game, Nick. The field conditions looked awful in Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I'm not saying that's going to be the case. I mean, I think they're talking about it being at Wembley, right? So,
yeah,
the field would probably be pretty good. But I'm just saying there are all these extra factors that matter quite a bit, maybe more than an ordinary game where you're just saying, hey, are we better than this game, better than this team on this day? I think, Thamel brought up the point when he initially reported it that because KU Stadium is going to be in the state of construction next year, this is a home game that KU is giving up, and maybe they were more willing to do so. We've talked to Travis Goff. Obviously, one of the things that he said is that KU will be at reduced capacity next year as they continue to work on that east side, and so maybe it didn't matter as much to give away a home game to go there. I'm generally against international games for a lot of the reasons we just talked about. But to play devil's advocate, Nick, when we talked to Lance Leipold earlier this week, and you could go back on our channel and see that, one of the things that really stood out to me was him talking about the experience for the players and how he was a grad assistant, I believe, on the Nebraska team that went to Tokyo, and just basically how all these years later, you may be talking about, hey, I had 3 tackles against this team or whatever else. Everybody's talking about the fact that you got to go to Tokyo and you got to play there and experience that. And it would be, so similar for London and the type of trip that a lot of these student athletes wouldn't have had the chance to make up to this point. And so from an experience standpoint, you brought up sort of the fan experience standpoint for Kansas fans, if they can make it over. All of those things are positives. And then, the branding thing you mentioned, and also you tend to usually get paid pretty well to go overseas. And especially with Kansas giving up a home game, I would imagine the financial incentives would need to be pretty strong.
Yeah, the construction thing is interesting to me because,
Yep.
Look, I am not a expert in construction. I whatever KU's plans may be, but kind of my initial thought, Kevin, was, does it really help that much? Because I think I misspoke. It said September 26th. I meant September 19th is actually the reported date for the game. Yeah. Kansas is already on the schedule, supposed to play 2 home games before that, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, how much of a benefit construction-wise do you really get from having to already play home games, and then you get like basically 10 days essentially where you can
I don't think that it's I don't think that it's the benefit to construction. I think they're just saying, hey, if there's only going to be 36,000, 38,000, whatever fans in there, like, it's okay for us to give up a home game because it's not going to be the full experience. I didn't take it as like, oh, we'll be able to get more done with the crane with people not being there. I took it at least more as we're not giving up an actual like full on home game experience for this because the stadium is going to be in a state of construction.
Gotcha. One other note is if that date does end up coming into fruition, Kansas' schedule currently reflects that they would be playing Missouri on the 12th, the week before. So you're talking about another layer of that where you're going to play your arch rival and then presumably get on a plane to London the next day, I would guess. Like, you'd have to travel pretty quick. I don't know how that works.
Teams usually fly out, I feel like midweek or maybe even a little later, like get there on like Thursday. And I've always kind of thought, like you, Nick, that if you're going to do one of those trips, like, get the jet lag out of the way, fly early in the week, do all those things. I think a lot of coaches feel like we'd rather have our usual strong practice schedule, for the first few days, really get stuff honed in and then fly out because it's not as important for them to be as sharp, on Friday, for instance, as opposed to earlier in the week where it's like, hey, we're really trying to hammer in this game plan for Arizona State, and you guys are zombies out here, basically. So I would imagine they'd fly out midweek. It feels like that's what a lot of these teams do, is fly out like Wednesday or Thursday.
Well, I do remember the Chiefs when they played in Germany a couple years ago. They actually published a study that basically suggested, from a player perspective, it's better if you just wait and you don't even bother to try and like calculate jet lag. You just basically play on like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you just don't even you don't even try to change the players' body clocks. You just go like right at the end and don't even worry about it and play the game and come back. So I don't know, maybe there's some science behind that or whatever that's above my pay grade and above my
pay grade. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a break, and then we will dive into this matchup against Cincinnati that Kansas has coming up on Saturday morning. It's 11 a.m. kick. We'll talk all about KU and Cincinnati coming up next. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
What is good, people? It is Ben Heisler, KCSN betting analyst, with some thoughts on the upcoming matchup between Cincinnati and KU. The Jayhawks, a 4.5-point home favorite in this upcoming Big 12 matchup. But before we get started on that, again, for all of you that are living out in Missouri, the wait is almost over. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is coming so soon to the Show Me State. You can actually get signed up today, because new Missouri customers can get $300 in bonus bets once DraftKings Sportsbook launches on December 1st. You can download the app now, place a $5 bet once they're live. It's going to be such a fun experience having DraftKings Sportsbook available, whether you're interested in live in-game betting, super fast payouts, touchdown props, whatever you want to do to elevate your sports betting experience. DK Sportsbook is in on the action. And when they go live in Missouri, you're going to be betting with the Sportsbook app that is trusted by millions here in America. So let's talk about this game for a second. The Jayhawks, with a nice win, nice cover last week against West Virginia, who are coming off a big game themselves. Right now, we are seeing the Jayhawks getting a ton of money at DraftKings Sportsbook, 89% of the money and 87% of the bets at -4.5. The total right now, a little bit split, but not too split. 58% of the money is on the over, compared to 72% of the bets. The under getting 42% of the money, so more money on the under relative to the betting percentage, which is at 28. I think for this matchup, it's going to be closer than most people anticipate. I like Cincinnati here, +4.5, even though I expect Kansas to eventually pull away. It's a really intriguing matchup. And I thought Lance Leipold was fascinating when he said that this is the best team that the Jayhawks will have played so far this year. And surprisingly enough, Missouri fans didn't get all upset about it. Maybe they're just, moved on and they're not thinking about what any KU coach says. But I like the matchup. It's two very veteran quarterbacks in Jalen Daniels and Brendan Sorsby. Sorsby's completing over 70% of his passes. He's a dual threat, similar to Daniels. I think especially in this matchup, where Cincinnati can really put together an opportunity here is they've been elite in the red zone, at 100% red zone scoring. The Jayhawks, that's actually been a bit of their Achilles heel. They've kept some of the lower tier opponents from getting into the red zone. But when they've scored, the numbers aren't great. I like UC to be able to keep this game close, not be concerned. I think the early start time isn't a problem for them. I do think this is an ideal matchup for Cincinnati to go back and forth. Maybe your concern on that side is, they got a look ahead game to Iowa State at home next week. I don't think with that type of veteran team that's something that we should really be concerned about. I do think KU will win, but again, give me Cincinnati +4.5 in the matchup. I do expect them to try to limit Sorsby a little bit on the ground, but again, those red zone numbers for Cincinnati are awfully impressive. So if this is a game you're looking at, make sure you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the code KCSN to grab $300 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet once we are live on December 1st. Again, code KCSN in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Remember, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after they're issued. That excludes customers who redeem their pre-launch sign-up offer. Terms are available at sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. Of course, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Once again, if you have not already, please subscribe, Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You'll want to be subscribed on YouTube so that you'll be notified when we go live after Saturday's game between KU and Cincinnati. I mentioned the Chiefs before the break, Kevin, and also we talked about how the Chiefs may be involved in this game potentially if Travis Kelce just has to show up. You know what? I'm not even going to go there. But that does give me a chance to segue into this, which is you could be on the field at the 50-yard line inside GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium for the official coin toss at a Chiefs home game this season. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now to enter to win a chance to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score other exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you think of that segue, Kevin? Not my best work, probably.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty solid segue, honestly. Obviously, the Chiefs went to Brazil earlier this year. Did not go super well from an international trip standpoint, but the Chiefs are awesome to watch at Arrowhead, and I can't imagine what it would be like to be at the 50-yard line at Arrowhead for a Chiefs game. That would be pretty sick.
Yep, and you also have the tie-in to Cincinnati, who is KU's opponent, with a somewhat notable alum who is.
I think KU fans are more interested if somebody who is attached to Travis Kelce, who has visited the Hawk in her previous time, is going to also make that trip and wind up at the new booth.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, Kevin, because that was my plan for today's show, which is we're going to spend the next 30 minutes ranking all the Taylor Swift albums, songs, best lyrics, all that great stuff. No, I'm kidding.
It's a love story, Nick. Just
There you go. That's one Taylor Swift reference for the show. Probably one too many, if yes. But that's neither here nor there. Kansas is going to be playing against Cincinnati coming up on Saturday, 11 a.m. kickoff at David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium. Cincinnati is coming off of a bye week. The Bearcats are 2-1. They played that really close game against Nebraska at Arrowhead Stadium earlier to start the season. Lost 20-17. Then they played Bowling Green and won that one pretty comfortably, 34-20. And then they played Northwestern State and won that one 70-0. Northwestern State, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, I believe is going to be shuttering their football program soonish, if I'm not mistaken on that report. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I've actually been to Northwestern State. And I don't want to offend the people of Northwestern State, but I mean, I've been there and it was not great. I'll just leave it at that, I guess. So anyways, Cincinnati is 2-1. Like I said, they had the bye week. Now they come play Kansas. This will be their conference opener against KU in Lawrence. This game's also going to be on TNT, which could be fun and interesting. I don't know, a little bit different for them. So, Kevin, what's your initial reaction to this matchup? I know we talked about the fact that we felt heading into the West Virginia game that Kansas is set up to possibly be 5-1 heading to Texas Tech. Then Lance Leipold comes out on Monday and says Cincinnati's the best opponent they're going to say that they're going to see this season. And it's like, whoa, what? That's crazy. So where are you at with the Cincinnati team?
Well, I think he said so far, which I still don't agree with, because I still think, as much as people don't want to admit it, Missouri is probably a top 10, top 15 team, like legitimately. And I do not see that Cincinnati is a top 10, top 15 team. But initial reactions, other than the fact that I did not have Northwestern State catching strays on the show on my pay heed bingo card, you got to find some way to slow down Brendan Sorsby. He is sort of the head of the snake, if you will, the tip of the spear. And he's a guy that leads Cincinnati not just as a thrower. He's having a great year throwing the ball, but he's also Cincinnati's leading rusher, Nick. And one of the challenges that Sorsby presents is the fact that he is this big, powerful guy that if he gets past your defensive line, he's the size of your linebackers. He's bigger than your DBs. And so he's somebody that can sort of lower that shoulder and run through tackles when he gets to that next level. I believe on Pro Football Focus, Nick, of the quarterbacks who played enough qualifying snaps, so not like a backup who's thrown 5 passes with 3 touchdowns, I think Sorsby is the 3rd highest rated quarterback in the country. One being Will Hammond, actually, at Texas Tech, who is Texas Tech's backup, but actually has played enough snaps, came in against Utah and looked terrific. But no, Sorsby's really good. And you get to see a couple familiar faces on this offense too, Nick, in terms of Jeff Caldwell, who KU played against last year. He was a wide receiver at Lindenwood. And the running back that they're going to have sort of the 2-back running game with he and Sorsby, Tawee Walker, actually had a terrific game against Kansas for Oklahoma back in 2023 when Kansas pulled off that upset. He ran for 146 yards in that game. And so Cincinnati has some weapons. Their offensive line's playing fairly well. Defensively, we'll get into them a little bit more, but I do think that this is a team that represents a real challenge, and it's not it's not a game that I look at and say, oh, this is an easy win for Kansas. It's more, hey, this is going to be a really tight game, and Kansas needs to be on its game to collect a victory.
I just feel the need to set the record straight in Northwestern State, Kevin. Their football program is fine. What I was recalling was they actually had a player tragically pass away in 2023 and canceled the remainder of their season that year. But
Okay.
want to set the record straight there. All jokes aside, but I have been Northwestern State, and it is what it is. Moving on, as you said, I think you were kind of outlining, what the offense has for Cincinnati and some of the threats that they could pose. And I think this game is kind of reflected a little bit in the betting lines. If you're somebody who pays attention to betting lines, the lines that have been released for Kansas and Cincinnati has been really all over the place. It's been, Kansas only by as little as 2 points favorites, all the way up to almost a touchdown favorite. It's settled in between 4.5, 5.5, 6.5 for that range. So I think there's a bit of a sense of a lot of uncertainty even in that area of what this game could be, because Cincinnati has, as you said, Brennan Sorsby is a dual threat quarterback. There was more talk about that earlier this week with, how Kansas played against Bo Prabula and what they did to sort of stop him on the ground versus Sorsby and what they could do against Sorsby as well. And you mentioned, they've got some high profile transfers. I mean, I know Caldwell didn't do anything against Kansas when he was with Lindenwood last year, but he's still a very talented receiver. You mentioned Walker, the running back as well. So it's certainly going to pose a challenge, I think, for this Kansas defense and what they're going to be able to do. Now, obviously, I think when you look at the West Virginia game, the Kansas defense was outstanding. They were phenomenal. And we kind of talked about it in the post game. Some of that, I think, not all of it, but certainly I think a chunk of it had to do with the fact that their running back was out. Ty Edwards was out for the game after he was a game time decision. So they were starting a walk-on at running back. But setting that aside, the Kansas defense was very dominant. And you hope to see that maybe continue against the Cincinnati squad. But Cincinnati, I don't think should be, you shouldn't look at them and just sort of poo-poo the offense that they have. The big storyline, Kevin, for Cincinnati, to me, on the defensive side of the ball is their star nose tackle, Dante Corleone, his status is a bit unclear. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. We have not seen any of the official injury reports that they put out. It's normally the first one comes out on Wednesdays. Haven't seen anything officially come out on that, so we'll see. But I believe he was dealing with a bit of an ankle injury and hasn't really played much. Didn't play much in the last game, so his status could be up in the air for Cincinnati, and that is a player that is a game-changing type of player in terms of your game plan, right? Because of what he can do on the interior. You're talking about a bona fide NFL player, I think, in the future. Like, this dude is unequivocally going to be playing on Sundays in the not-so-distant future. And so the possibility of him not being there versus maybe not being 100%, not being fully effective could change things because, you think about this Kansas offensive line, Kevin, and we've talked about it. You had a chance to talk with Bryce Foster on Tuesday. He hasn't fully been 100%. I thought Bryce Foster was really surprisingly pretty candid with how he's played up to this point in the season and how he has viewed his play. And he talked about, meeting with offensive line coach Joe Paulson to talk about his play. And so if you have an NFL caliber player opposite you, over the center and Corleone, that's going to be a real challenge for them versus if he's not able to play or not 100%.
Yeah, 100%. And I actually had a chance to ask Bryce Foster about that and basically said, hey, you hear cornerbacks talk all the time. Hey, I've got, Jamar Chase this week. I'm really excited for this challenge. And I asked him, if you're an offensive line guy, or is it similar? And I thought it was interesting where it was kind of like a yes and no answer, sort of, hey, I'm an offensive line. I just go out and do what I do, basically. But of course, I know who I'm up against, what they do well, and how to do that. He's such a big key for that defense, though, Nick, because we talked before we got on. I really like the Cincinnati linebacking core. I really do. I think when you look at Jake Golday, Jack Dingle has been pretty good. Jonathan Thompson, they've got some guys at that position. But Corleone eats up blocks the way that he does, and he's not just a block eater, right? Like, he also makes plays himself. but he opens things up for the guys behind him. And so that can be the difference a lot of times between, say, a Golday making a tackle for 3 yards or making a tackle in the backfield. And so I think Corleone is going to be a big part, and his health is going to be a big part of the storyline of this football game, and whether KU is able to do what it wants to do from a pass protection standpoint. If he's not in, you do wonder, hey, is Cincinnati going to have to send some extra pressures, do some different things, because their cornerbacks have been okay, not great. And so you wonder if Jalen Daniels has time back there, if he's feeling sharp, he has a chance to potentially have a big day if he's not under pressure all game. And to be fair, Nick, like without Corleone, I don't think this defensive line is as good as West Virginia's. It's certainly not as good as Missouri's, and Jalen Daniels was able to have some opportunities in those games. He missed some of those opportunities against West Virginia, obviously, but I think that depending on what Corleone's status is, you could really sort of see, hey, this may open things up for Jalen Daniels to have a big game.
Yeah, speaking of Jalen Daniels, I am going to assume that we will see him look a little bit sharper on Saturday against Cincinnati than we did against West Virginia. I mean, I think I'm going to choose to look at the West Virginia game as more of an anomaly at this point, right? Of he just wasn't very sharp, and Coach Jim Zabrowski kind of talked about that earlier in the week about, when you have a guy like that, you just try to get him to mentally, hey, let's go, let's move on. And the beauty of Jalen Daniels is that even though he wasn't very good throwing the football against West Virginia, obviously he still significantly impacted the game with his legs and still ended up, being a major factor in the game. It wasn't like it was just completely derailing the entire offense, but yeah, I mean, I would assume that he's going to be a little bit sharper throwing the football. I think that's safe to expect from a player his caliber, that he'll bounce back from a not so great individual passing performance when you go back and look and, you miss Levi Wentz wide open on a third down play. A couple of your screen passes were a little bit even not where you needed the football to be for your guys to, you had to throw to Emmanuel Henderson where he has to go down to a knee to make the catch, that erases an 11-yard gain. So just things like that. I would assume he's going to be sharper in the game against Cincinnati. And, the ground game will be another interesting thing to watch as well, because we just talked about Dante Corleone and what impact he could have, but for Kansas, Daniel Highshaw only played a handful of snaps against West Virginia before seemingly re-aggravating an injury. And Lance Leipold's comments early in the week didn't exactly inspire me to think that Daniel Highshaw is going to be 100% / ready to go for the game on Saturday. So we'll see, what his availability is if he ends up, getting out there and playing. But obviously LeSean Williams stepped in and had the big explosive touchdown run. And again, we kind of talked about, the run game was a little bit inconsistent to start the game, but they stayed with it and they eventually kind of wore down West Virginia, it felt like, in the second half, and were able to find some more explosive runs, but could open up some more opportunities for Harry Stewart and Johnny Thompson, which is exciting as well. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Just what's the status of Daniel Highshaw? How does that affect things? And then beyond that, you think about the status of Cam Pickett as well, who is seemingly still continuing to try to battle back from injury. Played a bit more in the game against West Virginia, which was nice to see, but you'd love to see him get out there a little bit more as well and sort of add some extra depth to that wide receiver room. Kevin, the biggest question on my mind, number one, above anything else, will we see Bowden Gruen activate his invisibility cloak once again for a big play against Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think so. It's amazing how open that guy gets, and it's kind of funny to watch because he must be leading the Big 12 in separation yards per catch at this point. But I actually had a question for you, a little trivia question, stats question, etc. We talked about Tawee Walker, all right?
Sure.
Tawee Walker is the 4th highest graded running back in the Big 12, according to Pro Football Focus. Do you know who number 3 is?
I mean, I'm going to assume it's a Kansas player. I don't feel like you'd be asking me this question if it wasn't a Kansas player. I'll just take the bait. I'll say LeSean Williams.
That is correct. It is.
There we go.
Williams at number 3. Yeah. So I think Le'Shawn showed some really great stuff. I would highly encourage. I know we keep pointing back to previous videos, but I would encourage you to go back and watch Zabrowski talk about Jalen maybe not being the sharpest against West Virginia. He kind of cracked the joke that when Jalen missed on one of his throws, he put his hands up to his helmet like he couldn't believe it. And he said when we were watching film, I was kind of joking around with him. I was like, man, you were like that. I was like that up in the box. Couldn't believe that you missed that. But in all seriousness, I do think that this is a matchup where tight ends, sort of the quote unquote auxiliary players are probably going to play a pretty big role, whether it's from a blocking standpoint, whether it's, Bowden Groen activating his invisibility cloak, Deshaun Hanukkah getting open down the field, or even Carson Brune just mashing people in the run game. And on the other side, Nick, Joe Royer hasn't had a big year so far, but we know he's really good, the Cincinnati tight end. And when you look at how much Kansas struggled against Brett Norfleet, against Missouri, Royer is a guy that I think is kind of an X factor for that Cincinnati offense at tight end as well. If he catches a touchdown or two, that could wind up being a big difference in the Bearcats' favor.
Yeah, could be a big matchup to watch on both sides of the ball, as you said, because for Kansas, you wonder against Missouri. You think about the fact that Bengali Kamara wasn't 100%, still played a lot and obviously made a big impact. But if he's feeling in a better spot against Cincinnati, maybe that helps with coverage of the tight ends. Trey Lathan, I think, has got to be feeling really good and playing with a lot of confidence based off of his performance against West Virginia. You mentioned Joe Sip. Is he able to get out there a little bit more against Cincinnati? I'll be curious to see what Lance Leipold's injury report says. Or actually, I won't, because I don't believe in injury reports because they're all pointless. So, Speaking of, dude, it took 1 week.
Thanks, Kyle Whittingham.
Exactly. It took 1 week for somebody to get in hot water about that, where, dude, like, Devin Dampier doesn't play very well, and then Whittingham comes out after the game and it's like, well, actually, he was hurt. And then everyone's like, well, wait a minute. There's an injury report that you're supposed to put out, and he wasn't on it. So does he suck or was he hurt? Which is it? Like, it can't be. You can't just try to make excuses after the fact.
Well, it's funny because I think one of the excuses that people used was, well, we always knew he was going to play, and so he didn't need to be on the doubtful or probable or whatever. You could kind of use the same rationale for Daniel Highshaw, who did show up on KU's injury report, Nick, although I believe he was not on the Friday injury report. But Lance Leipold said after the game, yeah, he's banged up. He was going to give it a go. And so it is kind of interesting to see the way that coaches are dealing with this. If you're looking at it from a non-cynical standpoint, you'd say, well, they knew they were going to play, and so they didn't put them on the injury report. But from the other standpoint, there is, some people will say, well, is that really the way that this is supposed to go, or is it supposed to be an accurate look at, okay, this guy is legitimately banged up?
For the record, I think it's stupid because everybody's just going to lie. All the coaches are going to lie.
It's just for gambling purposes. Like, whatever they say, like, that's the whole reason you have it. Because if you talk to coaches, they don't want to put that information out there. They don't.
No.
It's another thing on top of, not like they don't already have work to do, right? It's another thing on top of what they're already doing. Two, they don't want to give that information away. And so it's 100% a gambling thing. And so, yeah, I think that when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, I wouldn't expect coaches to be like, okay, I'm going to take this 100% at face value and put down every single guy that has any sort of ailment on our roster. By the way, this time of year, Nick, you'd be listing half your freaking roster. Like, guys that you have no doubt if they're going to play, it's like, well, okay, like, this dude's got an ankle. Like, everybody is banged up at this point. Your injury list would literally be, 35 names. It would be, at least. It would be crazy.
Yeah, it's incredibly dumb. I hate it. So let's take one more really quick break. When we come back, talk about some players to watch and maybe make some game predictions for this game. That's coming up next.
I'm Brett Goodwin, one of the owners of The Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is a neighborhood toy store in Prairie Village, Kansas. This been here in this location since 2000s, and my husband Alan and I purchased the store in 2023. Alan and I grew up in families where we've always wanted to have a business together. Alan grew up, for instance, his parents had a jewelry store. I worked in a local toy store here in Prairie Village when I was growing up. When this opportunity happened in 2023, we knew right away we wanted to contact them and pursue the store. We wouldn't have been able to get the store without the team at Emprise Bank. From the day we contacted them, they knew what we needed to do, which was very helpful. I would absolutely recommend the team at Emprise Bank to anyone looking to secure a business. We worked with Emprise from day one. They were extremely helpful. They were always great resources. We talk to them frequently. They know the area. They're very friendly. We know who we're going to talk with, and they know what we need to do. We hope we'll see you at the Learning Tree.
What's up, guys? I'm BJ Kissel, founder and CEO of KC Sports Network, and I'm here to talk to Kansas City businesses. If you rely on technology, you need an IT support team that's not just another vendor, but a true IT partner. That's why I want to introduce you to my friend and neighbor, KJ Miller. He is a VCIO at ThrottleNet, the Midwest's highest rated and most reviewed IT support company. They've been in business for more than 25 years, helping companies stay secure, productive, and ahead of the curve. They aren't just IT support, but they provide data security, IT strategy, and cloud software services. They do it all, and their reviews show they do it better than anyone else. So if you want to hear about how ThrottleNet can help your local business, join the conversation with myself, KJ Miller from ThrottleNet, and our resident genius from KC Sports Network when it comes to IT, at least as he's affectionately known by us, Mr. Craig Stout. Click the link in the description to hear how ThrottleNet can help you.
This is the Payee Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you have not already, subscribe, Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, because we will be live on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN after the game on Saturday afternoon between Kansas and Cincinnati, live from David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium. So you'll want to be subscribed so you'll be notified when we go live after the game, and you can come join us and hang out with lots of other great KU fans and join our growing community. So I really appreciate you if you have already done so, and I look forward to hearing from you on Saturday after the game. All right, so Kansas taking on Cincinnati. Kevin, who is a player to watch for you? Let's start with the offense, the Kansas offense. Who are you going to be keeping an eye on this Kansas offense in the game against Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think this game is going to be fascinating for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the things that Kansas needs to do differently, because Cincinnati can present some of the same challenges that Missouri does offensively, Kansas is going to need to hold on to the ball a little bit better than it did against Missouri. You can't have a situation where out of 50 in-game plays, 46 are run by the other team. And so when you look at all of that, I think Bryce Foster is a guy that stands out to me, and not just because we talked to him this week, and I very nearly picked Le'Shawn Williams. But I think, Kansas's guards are playing well. You look at Enrique Cruz is playing better by the week. And so if Bryce Foster starts playing like the Bryce Foster that we saw when he was at his best a year ago, all of a sudden Kansas is going to start churning out some of those yards. They're going to start churning out a little bit better time of possession, Nick, and they're going to be able to sort of maintain drives a little bit better. And so Bryce Foster is going to be a guy that I'm interested in watching. He talked about the meeting with Daryl Agpal, so I thought that was fascinating. Somebody asked him, I believe it was Jordan Gusky at the Capital Journal, asked him, said, hey, did Agpalsa tell you that you were doing something better than maybe you thought? And Foster, it wasn't that kind of meeting. Like I told him I did not want to hear anything positive. I just wanted to talk about, what I could do better. And if he responds to that the right way, if he comes out and it's like, oh, that's Bryce Foster out there, then I think Kansas's offense has a chance to take another step forward. And that's huge, because when Kansas gets into its biggest games, you aren't just going to be able to have a Missouri-like thing where you're putting everything on Jalen Daniels' back and saying, if he throws for 300, maybe we win. If he doesn't, we probably lose. And so I'm watching Bryce Foster in particular in that Kansas running game.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be a big part of it, right? I mean, he is a guy that can be a real road grader. And again, we talked about the possibility of matching up with Corleone on the other side or what his status may be. So I think that's a really strong pick. I was thinking about LeSean Williams. You mentioned LeSean Williams as well, and I think he's going to be a player to watch us also. But I'm gonna kind of go for the low hanging fruit here, Kevin. I'm just gonna say Jalen Daniels.
Sure.
Jalen Daniels, from a passing perspective, had I think definitely his worst passing game of the season against West Virginia, and he still threw for 3 touchdowns and still led Kansas to an easy win. But for Kansas to really insert themselves into that Big 12 title discussion, which I think we're still maybe about a week or two away from getting fully into that conversation, it has to be Jalen Daniels playing at a high level, right? And so what does he look like in Cincinnati? Can he sort of shake off a negative passing performance in a big win and really regain some of that and also still continue to utilize his legs? Because in the West Virginia game, that was really where he ultimately probably had the biggest impact. You think about that last drive before the end of the half where he's able to take a couple scrambles and it takes a late hit as well, which, that was an unfortunate play, but ends up setting up KU to kick a field goal at the end of the half against West Virginia. So I'm watching Jalen Daniels. What does he look like from a passing perspective? Is he getting the ball in the right spot? Is he able to make those plays? Is he able to avoid the plays that gives you the surrender cobra, those types of plays. So it may be a little bit low hanging fruit, but yeah, I'm just kind of watching to see if he can sort of bounce back from his performance last week against West Virginia and hopefully be sharp against Cincinnati.
Yeah, I definitely like that pick. I think, we expect Jalen to bounce back, and so if he does bounce back, if he's really sharp throwing the ball in addition to all the other things that he does, getting Kansas into the right plays, using his legs, then you're going to say, okay, what one off is fine. Jalen Daniels is still Jalen Daniels.
Yeah. Yeah. As of right now, I'm definitely looking at that West Virginia game and saying, okay, that was the outlier. But, I still want him to go out and kind of prove that on Saturday in Cincinnati and prove that it was indeed an outlier for him performance-wise. You mentioned LeSean Williams.
So the one thing I wanted to say, too, real quick, is both of our picks, I think, are kind of related in that Kansas against West Virginia was great on big plays, right? You had several, I think 4 of the 5 touchdowns were from 40-plus yards, including Emmanuel Henderson's kick return. And so the big play element was there, and it's, you applaud that. That's awesome. That's something that a year ago they didn't do well enough. The flip side is last year they were a little bit more consistent in terms of how they moved the ball. And I think both of us, whether it's Jalen Daniels connecting more consistently, whether it's Bryce Foster helping them find more consistency in the running game, what we're looking for is, okay, you've got the big play element. That's great. But how can you find a way to grind things out? How can you find a way to consistently move the chains? And that's something I think they can continue to do a little bit better.
Well, and I think that ties into a guy that you and I sounds like may have been our second picks, which was LeSean Williams.
Yes, sure.
In terms of also getting the run game going and establishing the run game as well. So, not some bad picks there. All right. What about the defensive side of the ball for Kansas? We spent some time talking about the offense for Cincinnati. They've got some weapons. Sorsby is a weapon in and of his own. Towie Walker's a pretty strong running back. You mentioned Caldwell as well. They've got a couple of the transfers to the wide receiver position. You mentioned the tight end also for Cincinnati. Who's a player you're going to be keeping an eye on for the Kansas defense?
Yeah, I think probably Trey Lathan would be a little bit of maybe low-hanging fruit again. But I think that with the way he played against West Virginia and the way he played against Missouri, he was a big part of making sure that Bo Pribula didn't really use his legs the way that he wanted to. And then you add in, Nick, the fact that we were talking about Joe Royer potentially being a big guy, the fact that you're going to run Towie Walker, who's a really physical running back as well, being in the middle of that defense, making sure everybody is where they're supposed to be, that they're running what they're supposed to be, they're in the right gaps. And then even beyond that, to bounce between all those jobs of, hey, I'm going to help cover a tight end. Hey, I'm going to come up and run support. I'm going to spy Brendan Sorsby, all of those different things. There's a lot on Trey Lathan's plate this week, and I think if he plays really well, then that sets up well for Kansas to win this football game.
Something else to note for the defense of Kansas that we hadn't mentioned yet is Devin Dye is going to be out for the first half of the game after his targeting call against West Virginia. Taylor Davis was a game time decision for the game on Saturday, ends up playing. Lance Heupel kind of commended him for sort of battling through what he was dealing with. We'll see what his status is, but Kansas secondary on the back end could be a little thin potentially to start this game, at least for the first half, with Devin Dye not able to play, which I guess sort of ties into my pick, but a guy that I think I just continue to love watching to play, and he just continues to make big plays and make exciting plays is Lyric Rawls. Like, yep. I'm genuinely excited to watch him play football on a week-to-week basis. You know, he has the great interception off the sort of the deflection in the first game of the season against Fresno State. Against West Virginia, he absolutely had that huge hit to break up a pass play in the second half of that game. And he's just a fun player to watch, and I think he can do a lot of different things for Kansas as well as sort of your over the middle thumper guy. He can blitz. He's excellent in run support. He can play in the box, and he is somebody that I think you mentioned with Royer. He could be a guy that factors in terms of covering the tight ends as well. So I like watching Lyric Rawls play. He's fun. He makes plays. He's near the football a lot, and I think he's turned into a really excellent leader as well in the secondary for Kansas to start the year. So my pick is Lyric Rawls.
Two things on that. One, my understanding is Lyric Rawls can get another year after this year, and Trey Lathan is also a junior, so you can have both of those guys back. And number two, Nick, there are two Kansas defensive players this year who are ranked in Pro Football Focus's top 4 in the Big 12 at their position: Trey Lathan and Lyric Rawls. Yeah. So you have guys that are kind of starting to build the foundation, I feel like, of this defense. And I still think the biggest strength is that group of defensive tackles, the fact that they can rotate through those guys with little to no drop off, that all of those guys are pretty good. But I think from a specific, player standpoint, Trey Lathan's having an all Big 12 type season so far. So is Lyric Rawls, and both of those guys are going to be big in this game for sure.
Yeah, I think Lyric Rawls has the ability to apply for a medical redshirt for one of his past seasons if he wanted to try to apply for that and get another year of eligibility for 2026, which I would be all for it at this point. I mean, I think he's more than proven himself to be a field general and a guy that can really establish a lot of physicality out of the secondary and do a lot of different things for Kansas in that back half. So how about that? Some people might say that we know a little bit of ball because we picked the top 2 guys.
There you go.
I'm just saying, I some people might say it. I wouldn't say it. Others might, but some people might say it. Speaking of what some people are saying, what are you saying, Kevin, about this game? What is your score prediction for this game? Does Kansas improve to 2-0 in conference play?
Yeah, when we were doing our live show on Saturday, and thanks to all of those of you who were in there with us, it was a great show, and we really, really appreciated you guys. Somebody actually asked what I thought the spread would be, or what we thought the spread would be. And, I think I said right around 6 or 7 points. And like you said, the spread's been all over the place. But that's kind of where I like this game to be, Nick. When I look at it and really sort of bore down into it, I think it's about a touchdown game, and I think that Kansas has the edge in that. I'll go 28-21. I think Kansas's defense is playing pretty well, so I don't think this is going to be, some sort of shootout. But at the same time, I do think this is going to be a pretty close game, and I like Kansas to ultimately win by about a touchdown. How about you?
Yeah, the Cincinnati team, I mentioned it kind of off the top, but they are a little bit interesting because you played basically a road game against Nebraska at Arrowhead Stadium in front of, essentially 70,000 Nebraska fans, and arguably could have or maybe should have won that game, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
Cincinnati could easily be 3-0 right now, and they've obviously have been tested in road environments a little bit also. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of have it's kind of been tough to read where Cincinnati's at. They're going to be coming off of a bye week also. So what does that mean for them? Their offense, I think, has some unique skill sets that we've outlined. The defense, I think Jim Zareski talked about how they run sort of that 3-down defense, right? With the sort of the 3-down lineman and then kind of the shell over the top. What does that mean for KU's passing game? I think Kansas will win, though. I am going to pick Kansas. I think this is similarly to you. I suspect this may be a game where it's pretty tight, but I think Kansas might get a late touchdown to kind of open it up a little bit. I'm going to go Kansas 31, Cincinnati 20. That's my score prediction.
That's 1 point off of what I picked for the West Virginia game, which turned out to be way wrong.
Yeah, we were both wrong.
Yeah, both of us looked at that spread and we were like, man, that's an awfully rich spread. And then, of course, Kansas goes out and wins by 30 points and, quite frankly, could have won by significantly more. Left some stuff on the field in addition to, playing the backups for the last almost full quarter. So, yeah, that was a game where we probably underestimated Kansas a little bit. And let's be honest, overestimated West Virginia quite a bit. And so in this case, I do think Cincinnati's got a good football team, but ultimately I think that Kansas gets the job done here to move to 4-1.
Yeah, speaking of overestimating West Virginia, somebody may need to check on one of our commenters who was a West Virginia fan who tried to claim that West Virginia was better than Missouri. I'm not really sure what sport that guy is watching, but certainly it can't be football. So I don't know. So shout out to everybody that drops comments, that shares their thoughts. Yes, we do read them. Yes, we do see them. And especially we will see them if you join us live on Saturday after the KU Cincinnati game. And the best way to make sure that you do that is to subscribe so that you're notified when we go live on Saturday afternoon. You can join us in our YouTube live chat live from David Booth, Kansas Motor Stadium on Saturday afternoon. But I think that's about going to wrap up the show here today, Kevin, unless you got anything else you want to add quickly here at the end.
A sellout at David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium.
Which, by the way, it's sold out because possibility you could see some real star power.
No, actually, I'm going to say it's sold out because people are super interested in watching the University of Kansas Jayhawks play college football. But I could be wrong on that. It could be, it could be that, hey, this thing's going to fill up with Kelsey and Swifty Pond. But I am choosing to believe that all of these people are in love with the University of Kansas. So,
yep. I hope so too, and I hope that they get loud for this game. Should be a lot of fun. Weather's looking. I haven't actually checked the forecast. Is it going to be pretty nice? I think on Saturday.
I think it's supposed to be like 80 or so.
Yeah, pretty comfortable. Pretty comfortable Saturday. Might be a little chilly in the morning potentially, but that's. You know what that is? That's football weather, folks.
It's beautiful football weather. Yeah, and then if you go to the game, which you should be going to the game, you're going to finish up. You're going to walk out. It's going to be just an absolutely gorgeous afternoon, and you can hit up our channel on your phone as you're walking your car. Beautiful fall day in Lawrence, Kansas. The leaves are just starting to change colors, maybe just a little bit. And you can look at and see what we have to say and talk with us. I mean, we talk back to people too. So we chat with the people in the channel. So
yes, we love hearing from you folks. Love when people share comments. It makes the show that much more fun to engage with great Kansas fans. So echo everything that Kevin said. And with that being said, we're going to talk to you again on Saturday afternoon after KU and Cincinnati. Until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you on Saturday. See ya.